Greetings to you. My name is Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to Vlog 109. Grey literature. Yes, we're here. Grey literature. And just to clarify, this vlog is not on 50 shades of grey literature. There is no red room or riding crop or flexible cane to be deployed in the next 15 minutes or so. This is a different type of grey literature, but it's still important. This is part of our trilogy that was exploring information literacy. So we actually explored information literacy last week. This week we're looking at grey literature, and next week we look at the deal breakers in terms of referencing for examiners of doctoral projects. But I did want you to think about grey literature today. This is a brand new phrase for me in so many ways, because when I did my PhD, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, actually this phrase was never used. I'd never heard of it. I only heard of it for the first time 10 years ago, and it is powerful and it is interesting and it is important, because as we discussed in our vlog last week on information literacy, it helps us a great deal to think about the genres of information, the forms of information, the oeuvres of information. If we can start to shape or cluster information into different forms, like a grey literature category, then that enables enormously not only a literature review, but particularly, I would argue, systematic reviews. Our last vlog, therefore, talked about the importance of isolating genres of literature. So this week we're going to show what that can look like. So let's get into the grey zone. So grey literature is unpublished research. It is research that emerges from non-commercial publishers. I'll say that again. It's research that emerges from non-commercial publishers. Its first use, in terms of the etymology of the phrase grey literature, the first use I've found of it was from 1975 by a gentleman by the name of Charles Auger, and the publication I found it in was The Use of Reports Literature. The Use of Reports Literature. Now, I've got wonderful librarian friends all around the world. I'm sure you will correct me, but again, 1975 is the first usage I've found. So let's talk about what's in this genre of information. What actually composes grey literature? Well, you're doing some of it, so theses and dissertations are part of grey literature. So are maps. And can I say, I'm a big fan of maps. I've never really told anybody this, but I have map collections upstairs, so I'm a little bit obsessed by them. So maps are part of grey literature as well. Newsletters and bulletins, which are so important for so many of our different research projects. So newsletters, news reports, reports from organisations are part of grey literature. Fact sheets, policy statements are part of grey literature. Research reports, but also the pre-print and the post-print versions of articles. All of those elements are part of grey literature. So as you can see, this is really big and this is really important. So grey literature is derived from the academic community, but also private or corporate firms, corporations, and also pressure groups. Political organisations in one form or another also release grey literature. Grey literature is therefore incredibly interesting. It has two characteristics. Often it's of incredibly high quality. Remember, the academic community produces a lot of it, so this is an expertise-driven literature. But the other great advantage for a lot of us is it's incredibly current. Because the cycle of publication is shorter, we are able to read this very innovative material quickly and put it into our research. Now that's huge and that is important. The transformation in grey literature, and why I really didn't hear about it in my PhD and it's sort of everywhere now, the big change I think happened through the internet, through digitization and the mobility of documents that is enabled through digitisation. You see, grey literature wasn't really known about. It was sort of on shelves in libraries, and you either used it or you didn't. You were actually in the city that had that library or you weren't. So its currency and mobility was limited. But because those documents are now carried via PDF on the web, their audience now is much larger. So basically what happens, let's carry one narrative through. A report is written, a report is released, but then it is PDF'd, it is loaded up to the online environment, and it's linked or placed in a website where metadata ensures that it can be found, and full text searching can ensure via a Google search engine say, we can find it. So grey literature is more important now than it has ever been, because its audience now is so much larger. Now in the old days, which was of course about 20 years ago, in the old days grey literature had problems because it was ephemeral. It was the archetype, if you will, of ephemeral source material. It existed in one location, limited run, limited circulation, limited printing, and therefore it was very, very difficult to find. Librarians had challenges trying to source this information and then to try and catalogue it in some form. So it was very difficult for librarians to make this material accessible for us as researchers. Grey literature to this day tends to be clustered in universities, but now because of digitisation we have institutional repositories. So instead of it being locked in a university library in some city somewhere, now because of the repositories anybody can now locate and download and read and cite that document. There are some fantastic new indexes or indices that exist for grey literature, and one particularly if you're interested in European grey literature, it just changes my life, to be honest with you. When I do my work on regional development and digital fitness, digital health, I get drawn to this all the time. So particularly I want to draw you to Open Grey. Open Grey, www.opengrey.eu. That's the trick there, .eu. So it is the European Open Grey Literature Depository. Fantastic. The strengths and advantages of grey literature, as you can see, are profound, but their usage is very, very pivotal, I would argue, for health. Particularly in health, we see a lot of different depositories in existence. The Australian grey literature, particularly in health, is very, very well catalogued, and I'll just list a few of these. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, remarkable gathering of grey literature documents. Oh wow, Australian Indigenous Health Info Net. Incredible resource. I saw Monica yesterday at the shops. Hi Monica. Monica, I hope for your incredible research you are using that great grey literature resource, really powerful. And also RAW, the Registry of Australian Primary Healthcare Research. So as you can see, health particularly is well serviced by grey literature, and it should be used. But I also wanted to, for the humanities and the social sciences, log the importance of Trove. Trove is based in the National Library of Australia, and in terms of understanding and gathering up reports, let alone newspapers and magazines and all the rest of it, Trove is simply astonishing. So please seek that out if you're in the humanities and the social sciences. There's a lot of resources that are available, and we should really be deploying them and thinking through what's available and sharing this information literacy expertise. So the strengths of grey literature, enormous. It is overwhelmingly free to access, and yes, this is important, it's an open access movement. So the overwhelming majority of grey literature is open access. Phenomenal. And what I would also argue is it provides a diversity of perspectives that are lost if we focus simply on black literature. And if I can confirm, black literature is the material that is created by commercial publishers. Now, the problems with grey literature, I'm sure there are many of those as well, but with good information literacy skills, they can be transcended. So Some of the weaknesses of grey literature, well, some pretty political and staunch organisations share their wares and share their ideas via their reports and their newsletters. But as long as your information literacy skills are in place, whatever someone is arguing, you have the ability to understand it, interpret it, and use it in a different way that's reflexive and careful. So just because someone has a strong view doesn't mean it should be ignored, but it does mean that it should be interpreted. Remember though that bias always has a gift in it as well. Grey literature is that non-commercial literature, and you've heard me when I talk about open access, I get really cross that people talk about bias in grey literature, pretending that like commercial publishers don't have a bias. Commercial publishers publish works that make a profit. That's a bias. So recognise that bias in the black literature as much as the grey. So if you're interested in configuring this sort of comprehensive research report, which all of us should be, then seeking out grey literature I think is great. As an examiner, when I see that a student has sought out this type of really bespoke, specialist, edgy, current material, I am deeply impressed. And I know that the information literacy protocols are in place if they are deploying grey literature. So it is a proxy that this person is a great researcher, to be honest with you. And also it is a statement that you're understanding the bias of commercial publishers and you're balancing that out through different genres of information. And do remember that, commercial publishers, and I deal with commercial publishers on a daily basis, I publish with commercial publishers, but remember they're in it to make money. They're in it to make money, and that impacts also on the type of research that they publish. So the research quality in grey literature may be incredibly high, but because it lacks that formal publisher, it means that the dissemination of that research may be more limited. But that's why we need to focus on metadata, making sure that the metadata on all these documents is of a high order and that the web distribution mechanism is in place so we can find it. So once those two variables are in place, grey literature comes to life. Now, as you can pick up, systematic reviews, literature reviews, in health in particular, you can't avoid grey literature, and neither should you. And of course, people like me who work with public policy material, who are working in urban regeneration, second, third tier cities, city regeneration, this is our bread and butter. This is fantastically innovative work to deploy. But also, for example, in archaeology, great example, so site surveys and excavation reports, how brilliant is this, are also available digitally online and we can look at them. So, to find grey literature, we can look in our library databases, that's terrific. Another great way to do it that I enact, particularly when I'm doing my work on urban redevelopment, for example, is I focus on key researchers. So if there are key researchers or writers, if you will, in your field, often they will have a website which not only presents their publicly available material that they've actually publicly put out for an audience, but also their reports, their sort of work that they're developing as they go, and that's available on their website. So I'm always fascinated by that. If you want the really edgy material, then look at the personal websites of professionals that you respect, and the work there is stunning. Institutional repositories, another great example, keep current with all of those. And of course, Google. Google and Google Scholar can be incredibly useful, but you have to deploy really good research terms so you can hit that metadata and you can find that material. So your information literacy skills have to be high to activate this grey literature. And I think the online environment, digitization, has provided us with a lot of gifts. But one is, I think, it has allowed the mobility of this high quality grey literature, and that is a gift. So for me, what I think is great about digitisation is speed and mobility. And through both speed and mobility, that has enabled the increasing currency and value of grey literature. And I think it is transforming the doctoral space. It is transforming how a PhD student will do their research. So always remember that this is an area of incredible potential beyond health and indeed potential beyond education, the social sciences and the humanities. We're only just discovering how incredibly valuable grey literature can be, and our job as researchers in and for the future, and for speaking to audiences in and for the future, is to locate, validate and affirm the value of this new oeuvre or genre of information. Very exciting times. See? It's not 50 Shades of Grey, it's actually a little bit more interesting. So I wish you well with grey literature, and I wish you love, light and peace. Tea out.